When you really sit down and look at it, all the winding, twisting passages in Guacamelee 2 are just one long corridor. The critical path zigzags, turns in on itself, and makes all manner of twists and turns, but it's also the only path to follow. But I'll be damned if that realization did anything to dampen my enthusiasm for what's been the most fun corridor I've gone down in months. As always, I'm Alex, and this is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm going to tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. And today, we're body slamming our way through a quest for the sacred guacamole in Guacamelee 2. Guacamelee 2 picks up with a rehash of the final boss fight from the first game, ripping straight from Symphony of the Night. You're quickly off on your next adventure, however, this time exploring the darkest timeline of the Mexiverse, where everything is terrible, Juan is dead, and the world's savior is a very angry dude slowly being killed by his mask. And the plot from there is mostly an excuse to have you trade blows with ridiculous, over-the-top personas and deliver little one-off gags riffing on games from across the entire industry. For the most part, it does its job to keep everything glued together, but that narrative isn't what you're going to come to this game for. So what about the gameplay? Guacamelee 2 tends to alternate between combat and platforming challenges, and only rarely shall the two ever meet. Predominantly, you'll be going between self-contained rooms which will either contain a platforming challenge or a lucha segment that locks you in an arena with a horde of enemies you have to beat to progress. But even if the platforming and combat are largely kept separate, both elements are done to perfection. Combat is surprisingly deep, with a simple but full combo system to dig into, complete with knockups, grabs, and wall bounces, and it introduces a surprising number of elements in the first hour that make Guacamelee's combat feel entertaining from the very start. Before long, you'll be adding special moves to chain together hits and dodge enemy attacks, running into enemies that require you to use certain moves to break their armor, and getting additional wrestling moves that let you further manipulate the positioning of enemies. Platforming is similarly engaging and is more complex than just jumping from platform to platform. You've got a grappling hook move that works similarly to Ori's bash attack, many segments require you to use your special attacks to get that extra inch of distance to reach the next platform, and you eventually gain the ability to phase between the world of the living and the world of the dead, something the game frequently makes use of by making you phase between the two worlds mid-jump to bring different platforms in and out of existence. Both combat and platforming are pretty engaging systems on their own, but Guacamelee 2 is constantly throwing new mechanics in that complicate both in new and interesting ways. In the first dungeon alone, there were 3 separate major mechanics introduced. First, you had an area that phased regularly between the two worlds on its own. Then you had another wing with these spike traps that pop out of the ground. And then you get these turrets that you have to dodge. All of these mechanics are relatively simple, but when you bang them against Guacamelee's combat and platforming systems, you get some incredibly creative and engaging segments. Like this one platforming challenge that sees you running through a pit of lava with a moving safe zone. Or this lucha segment where you have to run down conveyor belts of infinitely spawning enemies you have to dodge through. The sole aspect of Guacamelee 2 that I think might bother some people is that it's a lot more linear than most Metroidvania-type games. There's still plenty of backtracking to access areas you couldn't before, but they're all clearly marked, and there isn't much in the way of side paths. Even in the overworld, there's only ever a single winding corridor to take you from point A to B, and any offshoots immediately dead-end and optional platforming challenges you can collect stat bonuses in. The result is that exploration is almost non-existent, and I could see that bothering some fans of the Metroidvania genre. But the trade-off is that Guacamelee 2 is an extremely tight game with almost no fat on its bones. There is zero wasted space in this game. Every room has a unique challenge, and no challenge is repeated exactly twice. Every new region introduces a half-dozen new mechanics for the game to play with, and the developers are shockingly inventive with how many different ways they can manipulate just one mechanic, to say nothing of what happens once they start mix and matching them. And that tight construction is particularly important for our verdict. 5 hours is enough to take you through Guacamelee's first 2 dungeons, and as best as I can tell, I'm halfway through the game. But those 5 hours are exceptionally dense. It feels like the devs are throwing a new idea at you almost every 10 feet. That means that the game gets complicated quickly, particularly once you can start phasing between dimensions. But for someone tight on time, this is an absolute godsend. Even if I'm only halfway through the game, it's already given me more unique, interesting challenges than some games do with quadruple the time, and so I can easily recommend it for anyone looking for a compelling but short experience. And I'm eager to jump back in and see what the game has in store for me next. Overall, Guacamelee 2 does nothing to radically change the genre. There's no big hook here to differentiate it from other platformers, Metroidvanias, or side-scrolling beat-em-ups, and almost all of its mechanics have shown up in other games before it. A lot of the stuff I've highlighted here actually probably sounds kind of generic, but everything Guacamelee does is done with extreme polish, and it approaches all of these mechanics with creativity befitting a mad scientist, slapping them together in new and interesting combinations with manic glee. And the entire time, I was sitting there grinning right along with it. Guacamelee 2 is an exceptional, thrilling ride that just keeps on giving, and I'm loving it. Hey, do you believe that your time is the most valuable thing you have? Do you want to find more games that respect that time? This channel is all about finding games that don't pad themselves and can be completed in a reasonable amount of time. So if that sounds appealing to you, then consider hitting that subscribe button. But regardless, thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.